Good afternoon, brothers and sisters, comrades. This panel discussion, as has already been explained, is about pride in disability, why it matters, why the social model of disability is important. So on the panel today, I'd like to introduce Colleen Johnson from Prospect, and it's of course
from the National Education Union.
Sorry. National Education.
Amy Bishop's from Prospect.
Yes, apologies for that. I'm trying to look down on various vocals. Amy Bishop from Prospect and the TUC Disabilities Workers Committee, and Svetlana from Director of Campaigns and Justice. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, ask each person, why should they be proud in disability? So I'll start with you, Colleen.
Okay, so I'm going to speak for about 10 minutes. I think we've got 10 minutes each. Right. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our campaign from the National Education Union. So our campaign came from a motion that requested two very special things. A self-ID campaign to build our membership of disabled members, and a disability pride focus to raise the profile and status of our group. So the self-ID campaign had been a long-term ask, and we knew that the barriers were a difficulty, and so we knew it was a difficult profession for members, and you know, it was quite difficult to ask members to be more honest with themselves really about their status. And we made a video. In fact, you may well have met our videographer, Matt, who's here today. So we made a video and had online events to promote that self-ID video. And last year we began our work on disability pride, and we held seedling events such as afternoon teas for members, and we made placards and we took pictures all about disability rights. And some folks leafleted the public in city centres, promoting their pride at being part of the disabled community. Okay, and here last year we did a fringe event asking people's thoughts and opinions, starting from the two American disability pride designs. The first one that had the zigzags on, which later became the one with the straight lines on. And those focused on the different groups of people, the different strands of people within disabled people. So we listened to folks like the fantastic Sophie Gribben from Prospect. Hello, Sophie, if you're out there. Yay, Sophie. And we talked a lot about the social model, and we talked a lot about the barriers. And we noted that some people were okay with the word impairment, but others preferred different words, such as condition or such as difference. So we listened very carefully to that, and we were, very sort of mindful of that. And we put together a steering group from our organising forum of regional disabled reps, and we knew that we wanted to stress unity, and we wanted to stress the social model, and we wanted to stress the idea of celebration. Okay, so celebration of our community, of our history, which is very nice just after the speech, of our fight for rights and our shared principles and values. Disability pride for all disabled people, not just intersectional individuals, all disabled people. Pride in disabled identity itself. And we settled on 4 types of barriers. Communication barriers, formats, backgrounds, lack of speech to text, very important to our neurodivergent members, lack of British Sign Language, lack of hearing loops, lack of plain English texts, environmental barriers such as stairs, entrances, very difficult furniture for some of us, inaccessible transport systems, and even the lack of accessible loos. You know, the attitudinal barriers that I spoke about earlier this morning, limited expectations, And the issue of pity, I mean, let's not forget that phrase from Dan, piss on pity. We understand what that means. The idea of, inspirational disabled people, that idea that's sometimes referred to as inspiration porn. And the bad attitudes ending up in disability, hate speech and hate crime. And of course, all the institutional barriers that we deal with, that many of us face. The government, the unfair welfare systems, medical professionals, some solicitors, some occupational health companies, all of those can be institutional barriers. And we knew that we wanted circles for unity. And we knew that we wanted bright colours to also denote celebration. We didn't want anything that was grey or drab. And designs went backwards and forwards a few times. And there was very much discussion that was had. And eventually we agreed with design that we would like blue to relate to communication barriers, green for environmental barriers, orange for attitudinal ones, and purple for institutional barriers. And we ended up with a design which was really about overlapping circles, which vary as we experience the barriers to a greater or lesser degree at different times. And we also picked May as our focus month, a time for educators, for the NEU, for disabled members. It is when we have our NEU Disabled Members Conference. It is when we have our TUC Disabled Workers Conference. July and September are problematic for us because we've got the school year finishing and another school year beginning. And of course, the wonderful LGBT Pride season is fairly long. So we plumped for May. And so now we have our design, and you should possibly have one of our stickers on your table, and our merchandise is on the way. There are disability pride socials that are all planned in some regions, equality conferences with a pride in disabled identity aspect, residential events where we are spreading our message. And yes, in the dictionary, disability does refer to some sort of loss of function, but our section, we feel, reflects diversity in schools and colleges, and we are proud of that. We are proud of the fact that times are changing, proud of the fact that young people are disabled and out there, and that together we have lots to celebrate. Our strength, our determination, our adaptability, our flexibility, and our history and sense of community. There will always be challenges, friends, always. There'll be tough ones like the pandemic and this vile government, but hopefully they're on the way out. And together we are strong and a formidable force, and we should celebrate that. And that's what I think our steering group have managed to put together.
Thank you, Colleen, for a very sterling explanation of where disability sits within particularly the NEU and from the TUC perspective. Moving on to our next speaker now, Svetlana. Would you like to address the conference?
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here. It feels like this air is filled with solidarity. So my name is Svetlana Kotova. I work for an organization called Inclusion London. I lead campaigns and policy and justice work there. Inclusion London is a disabled people's organization. And you'd think how it's relevant to social model. Hopefully by the end of my speech you will definitely know. I did want to start with kind of my experience. I grew up always being told that something is wrong with me. I am a disabled person. I went to special school for blind people. I always was told that I need to be 100 times better, even be on equal footing with others, that I need to fit the system. And yeah, I believe that. And that was quite an isolating experience. Although when we got together with my classmates, we could change things really quickly. But the social model for me opened this idea that firstly, society should change, that what is wrong with my body is actually part of how we are. We're all different as human beings, and something is, to be honest, wrong with everyone if you look at it like this. And there is average standard, which is really made up. It doesn't exist. There isn't such an average person. And so society could change. But also what social model showed me is that there is a solidarity. It's not a lonely place, because there are other people who may have different impairments or conditions or needs, who may experience different barriers, but they all experience kind of same discrimination and oppression. And that our life and our world could change if we come together, and our voice is a lot stronger if we are together. We heard so many already powerful examples how people changed things when they got together. And this is why disabled people's organizations are important. This is why we are proud to be disabled, and this is why I'm proud to belong to disabled persons organization and to work there and to campaign for our rights, because I am with my comrades and friends who are different, but we experience same discrimination. And of course, we know that in a space where policy is made, a lot of the time we're not listened to. Well, we're not listened to even in our daily lives when someone thinks that they know, well, someone not only thinks, but they're given power to decide what we need. They know better how to support us, and we're not listened to. It's the same in the policy context, of course, when policymakers, politicians prefer to talk to organizations for us that are created to provide support or services for us, but disabled people are not in control there. They are not deciding what priorities should be. They're not deciding where resources should go. And this is why, as disabled people's organizations, we are campaigning for what we call co-production, so that nothing about us without us is real, that our voice is strong and it's heard by everyone in our individual lives, but also in the big policy context. And since we are in an election space, which is great, we can't wait, I did want to say a couple of words about the work that we have done together with other disabled people's organizations across England to put our demands on paper. We launched about almost a year ago our Disabled People's Manifesto. This is our vision for government. Of course, we are not under illusion that things will happen tomorrow, but this is how we want any government, and hopefully there'll be a different government. This is how we want them to approach policy. And these are some key things that we want. We want transformation, which means they need to recognize that just fixing same old is not going to work, that they need to put resources to changing the workplace, changing environment, changing how, for example, even contribution, what is a contribution to society is seen. So they need to really be bold and transformative. And they need to work with us and hear us as a big us, all disabled people. We also campaign for rights and justice, and not only rights on paper, because we all know when we try to ask for reasonable adjustments in the workplace, for example, already start with a place like uncomfortable, being too difficult. And we need rights that actually exist in reality, that it's easy for us to have and enforce. And we want independence, as in we make choice and control. Of course, we all depend on each other. It's not about that. It's not about living without people. But why should I always ask for help to guide me somewhere? There should be like signs and things so that I can do it myself. And I can choose when to ask for help. Maybe when I just want to make friends with someone or talk to someone. It's very different. And we talk about inclusion, which is, we know we are far away from inclusion. But what happens now is that it's very easy to put everything, resources and imagination into places where we are segregated. So care homes, I support so many people who need support from social care, and the local authorities' default option is try and just, if it's too expensive, too much, care home. And so we want like at least some difference in approach, or housing. All government special programs for disabled people are in specialist housing, when we want houses that are built for everyone. So we want a change in approach. It might not happen tomorrow. And we're not saying close all the spaces and just put everyone in a community, but we want at least some understanding that things could change and things can be made in the community so that we can live and learn and work where we are. And so that there is not a default option for segregation. But of course, some people may still need it for whatever reasons, but it shouldn't be the only place where all resources and power and imagination go. So you can Google our manifesto. We would really welcome for unions' support, because we also know that we need to build solidarity. As disabled people, we should lead the change, but we will never be able to do it without support from others. So we hope we can all work together and be proud and achieve this future that we want without barriers for all of us.
Thank you, Svetlana, for that very encouraging delivery of the work that you do, and may continue to do with all our support behind you. Finally, to our last speaker, and it's welcome Amy from Prospect, and who's also on under the TUC, Disabled Workers.
Right. Thank you, Dawn. So, hi, I'm Amy Bishop. My pronouns are she and her. As Dawn said, I'm a Prospect member. I'm also an equality rep, and I sit on Prospect's Equal Opportunities Advisory Committee and the TU Disabled Workers Committee, and I'm about to start my first term as part of Prospect's National Executive Committee. I've been a computational scientist for over 20 years. I live with a range of visible and invisible impairments. So, for example, quite clearly, I'm a PowerShare user. But what you can't see is that I'm neurodivergent, I'm artificially fed, to name just a few things. So when somebody first hears the term disability pride, I think most of society, including many disabled people, think, why on earth would I want to celebrate something that's wrong with me? This way of thinking comes from the long-term and widespread use of the medical or individual model, as it's sometimes called, of disability, that is seemingly ingrained into society. The medical model, or the individual model, if you want to call it that, says that we are disabled due to something that's faulty with us, that it's our fault that we can't access society in the way that non-disabled people can, and this is very much not what disability pride is all about. If you start thinking about disability from the viewpoint of the social model, then disability pride starts to make a huge amount more sense. As you've probably heard already today, the social model was devised by disabled people ourselves, and it says that people with impairments are disabled by barriers that society puts in our way. So these barriers could be physical, something like no level access, there could be no hearing loop, they could be organisational, so that could be things like, if you're thinking about work, it would be the policies and procedures that are in place. Or it could be due to attitudes. I think this is the type that is so often forgotten, but are really hugely important. So these could cover things like the false belief that autistic people can't be managers, that work has to mean full-time work in a workplace like an office or a factory or something like that, or that in fact that work makes somebody valuable to society. So looking at disability from this viewpoint, all disabled people, whatever their impairment, condition, difference and so on, we are all fighting the same fight against a society that just isn't built for us. Having pride in our identity as disabled people is a protest against the medical model and society's inaccessibility, and a celebration of disabled people and all our diversity. For me, I think disability pride is about being able to be my authentic self, not apologising for my access needs, and that we all deserve independent living and are just as capable and valuable members of society as everybody else. It's also about educating people that accessibility and inclusion is something that everybody plays a part in, whether you're disabled or non-disabled. The social model puts the onus on absolutely everybody to remove the barriers, as many barriers as possible. As a disabled person, I have pride in myself and my disabled identity. I can go out into society and show the world that disabled people can have happy, productive lives. For me, that happens to be by being at work, by being involved in trade union activities, by being married and so on. For others, it could be things like volunteering, being creative in some way, or being an activist on social media. Yes, it doesn't take away my pain or my fatigue and my other sort of impairments, but I can forge my own way in society. I can unapologetically ask the adjustments I need to help manage them and the time that I need to pace my activities. The medical model is so ingrained into society that many disabled people don't feel able to identify as disabled. Internalised ableism is a challenge for many disabled people. It's not their fault, it's society's. We are bombarded with messages that disabled people are somehow less than, that to be disabled is a bad thing, or that with some impairment groups, that they're making up their condition and they couldn't possibly be disabled. By using the social model and explaining how and why we're proud of being disabled, we can show that disabled isn't a dirty word, it's just a statement of fact. We can be role models for young people, or young disabled people, to show them what is possible, but also for young people in general. Our visible existence and pride in our identity, it really fights back against what society so often says that disabled people are, which is tragic and requiring charity. Disability pride is really good for mental well-being. It takes the onus of us, individuals, to fit in to an inaccessible world. It gives us the power to hold society to account and demand that barriers are removed so that we can all be included in the way that we wish to be, and that can be different for different people. Using the social model means that we are fighting for all disabled people, including those that may not be able to do so themselves. So in the workplace, we can negotiate to remove barriers in policies and procedures rather than solely relying on reasonable adjustments all the time. For example, you could negotiate for an interview procedure that gives everybody the questions in advance, or a training policy that requires their online training to be keyboard accessible, that has captions on its videos, and maybe has the option to turn the audio on and off, to name just a few things that different people have different requirements. In a wider society, we can campaign for things like accessible housing, an adequate income whether or not you're in work, inclusive education that isn't one size fits all, and appropriate and accessible information. So in the workplace, I've used the social model to ensure that Inequality Rep is always included on what we call our 2U policy committee. This is a meeting that we hold monthly with the employer. They bring to us planned changes to policies and procedures. So I use the social model to try and ensure that not only what is being suggested is inclusive, but also that it's written in a way that is clear and unambiguous. Clear policies, they not only benefit neurodivergent members of staff, but actually it benefits staff in general. Nobody likes wading through pages and pages of seemingly incomprehensible business speak, which often leads to a complete lack of consistency in application, as everybody ends up reading the document differently. This also leads to fewer personal cases, that the union and employer need to deal with, freeing up time for all the other really important union work that we have to do. So models aren't perfect. By definition, they are a simplification. And so the social model, it's not perfect. Impairment, it isn't the greatest word. But in practice, applying the thought processes of the social model, it's really powerful. If nothing else, we can all show our support for the social model by using the term disabled people rather than people with disabilities. You can't have something that you experience. Disabled is just a descriptor for a bunch of people with impairments that are disabled by society. It's not a bad word. Similarly, we can use the term non-disabled instead of able-bodied. Because able-bodied, it then suggests that disabled people aren't able. There's something wrong with you, which is very medical model. By using language that is consistent with the social model, in our everyday lives, in our workplaces, we can really start to fight back against the unconscious bias against disabled people and the barriers that we face in life. Thank you.
So you've had an overview from our three very professional, well speakers of why we should be proud of disability and its influence with the social model. I know myself, having worked with people in the past with learning disability, similar to the film, the programme The Piano, I can remember working with someone who was really disabled, and I was helping him hand over hand paint a caravan. Now, the lady that used to take us all out together, we used to do the usual swimming and horse riding and things, but she used to see very much now how we see today. But I'm going back more than 25 years ago. She had the attitude right then, and there are people in this world, in this community, in this county, like yourselves, that very much want to see the social model rolled out properly. Funds is always what gets thrown back at them. That's what the barrier was back then. Because the social worker said to you, you've got the idea that's right. Because she took people out and was seeing what they could do, not just restricting them to the usual playing. So at this point now, we'd like to know if anybody's got any questions for our panellists. And I'll take them in threes. Anyone got any questions?
One at the back.
A gentleman there as well.
Hello there. Hello, delegation. I would like to ask this question. My name's Colin Stewart from the RMT. I would like to ask this. You were on about the earlier on about the misinterpretation of wording of documentation and that. Could you please tell me what's happened to the resolution that was passed last year on the clear communications? Because we as a delegation from the RMT have not had any response back from that last year, and I would like to have confirmation of what has happened with that resolution, please.
That will have to come back from the TUC with that one, so that because obviously that was raised last year, but that will be raised up.
Hi there, Christina Payne, London Metropolitan University, UCU. I'd like to ask the question, you mentioned kind of how often employers will say they can't afford to make reasonable adjustments. My employer does that all the time, but the other thing that links to that is that when you go to tribunal, they then put forward business objectives and objective justifications that mean that complaints against reasonable adjustments not being put in, which is a very basic level, I know, but this is where we are, then don't get put forward either. What I'm asking really is, do you have a way to counter that kind of business-led culture which tells us they can't afford to have disabled people in the workplace and they can't afford to give us secure contracts so that we can live? Do you have advice for how we could put good arguments about that? Thank you.
Anna, would you take that?
Well, I guess. Firstly, it is a big problem. But I think reasonable adjustments. Even I think Equality and Human Rights Commission's documents, and I think even the Equality Act says that unreasonable doesn't mean just only unaffordable. Like funding finance is important, but it's not the only thing that should be taken into consideration. I'm thinking big university business case, really. I mean, maybe there is some way that actually it's great that we hear unions could help to unpick this, like what is this business case and is it really true? Because sometimes it is scary and we think, oh, reasonable adjustments, unaffordable, that's the argument we can't argue with. So that's my suggestion.
Yeah, I think I haven't got the numbers off the top of my head, but I know there was some research done a number of years ago that showed that disabled people, once they were in a job with proper adjustments, that they were actually really loyal and really hardworking. And that's certainly, I say off the top of my head, I can't remember who produced that research, but you can certainly look for it online. And that's quite a good argument that actually if you provide people with what they need, you will get a loyal, hardworking member of staff.
Can I just add to that, you know, that there's a myth that reasonable adjustments are expensive. When we have worked with our members and we've worked with members of staff and we've written down lots and lots and lots of adjustments and then put them in like order of expense, and there was very few right at the end that were very expensive, and there was quite a lot near the beginning that weren't expensive at all. And so it's an absolute myth. You know, you do not, you know, we are not asking for lifts to be put in historic buildings generally every day. You know, so that's one thing. And I would say making workplaces more accessible helps lots of people, helps it become just open to everybody, not just disabled people. And I've got a saying in the NEU that a win for a disabled member is a win for all members, because so many of those adjustments help, you know, other people. And I mean, I will say, you know, some people have very long lists of adjustments, but that's unusual. And you do have to be a little bit careful when somebody's adjustment makes somebody else's life a little bit more tricky. But I often find it really difficult when people say, oh, we can't make this adjustment for you because everybody else can't really be bothered to slightly just change their ways, you know. And I just find that, you know, that it's almost at the behest of the majority of people that really can't be bothered. But no, most adjustments are inexpensive and open the workplace up to more people. And disabled people, are really, really flexible and adaptable, and they're good. They are good workers. I agree with Amy there.
Yeah, and finally, I mean,
Access to work.
yeah, as that's what I was just going to say, it's not a perfect system, but access to work exists. I've had a number of grants over the years. I find that the trade unions have to work quite a lot with the employer to get them to understand that it actually gets rid of quite a large amount of the cost. Even if someone's been there for quite a while, the amount that most organisations have to pay is actually not that much. So definitely raising awareness around that, despite the fact it's a far from perfect system. There's all sorts of problems with it, but it is usable.
Yes, I can back that up as well, as someone who's access to work. And the other thing as well is that when the reasonable adjustment passport came out originally, one of the things the late Gordon, who was one of the ones that originally worked on it, wanted it to also bring about was the fact that it can be used for people that haven't got a disability, but it had a temporary change, which, as Colleen explained, as said, didn't cost much. It's where they could negotiate, oh, well, you know, I'm not going to be able to work for a few weeks because I've had this happen to me or this change. Something that is easily to negotiate with an employer and wouldn't necessarily put them out of step. So there are ways around this. Annie, you've got your hand up.
Anne Galpin, NUJ and TUC Disabled Workers Committee. Chair Amy, Svetlana and Colleen, thank you for your brilliant introductions to the social model and why it matters. With the general election coming, I think it's even more crucial, well, I'm sure most people in the room think it's even more crucial that we work together in co-production the trade union, disabled workers and disabled people's movement. I mean, I'm very honoured to be invited to 10 DPO meetings and with my trade union hat on and as a DPO activist separately. But so I know that you can be both. But I would like to hear from all of you about how we can work productively together, because obviously we have different processes. One difference is that trade unions don't always start with the disabled person's point of view, and you know, we're working with non-disabled peers and colleagues and officials. So how can we work to ensure that within trade union matters, the disabled workers' voice is heard in everything and at every level, and how can we work productively with the disabled people's movement beyond the trade union? Thank you.
Colleen, would you like to start with that one?
I think it's really important to listen to disabled people's organisations. And I think the point Svetlana made earlier, these are groups where, you know, they are not speaking for disabled people. They are groups of disabled people speaking for themselves. And I mean, one of the things that we do at the NEU is we make a point of introducing disabled activists as keynote speakers. And we've done that before and we will be doing it again. And I mean, last year we were absolutely honoured to have Barbara Lizicki with us. And we also had a fantastic disabled journalist with us as well. And it was such a great mix of historically active people and newer active people. And just for our members to listen to these people speak, to interact with them, to ask them questions, it was absolutely fabulous. And of course, educators have that access to many families where they've got, you know, disabled parents or disabled children. And we're very lucky that disabled educators are, by and large, very popular with some of our SEND families, absolutely so. But yeah, that reaching out and listening and making that sort of contact where, you know, as much as possible, I would always say that, and I say it to the children I teach, listen to the authentic voice of disabled people. Look at their management structures. And that is the best thing to do. So, yeah, just doing as much of that as possible. Thank you for the question, Annie. I think it's really important.
Yeah, thanks for this question, Annie. I just wanted to give an example, for example, how it can work. Just, what was it, 2 months ago now, disabled people's organizations and union reps, so, you know, Annie's here, Andy's here, maybe there are others also who we all work together to go to United Nations and show how government is breaching our human rights, how austerity policies and all the cuts and changes to welfare are leading to huge violations of our rights. We worked together and we achieved a damning report, which government doesn't want to see or look at, but that is really powerful. And basically it shows if we work together, we can achieve big things. I agree with listening. I think we should start with this idea that we all want the best. We just need to listen and talk and see how we can work together. But it is really important that we do, because we know that on the levels of oppression, it's really hard for us to organize, and sometimes it's harder for us to be heard. So we need to support each other wherever we can.
And Amy?
I don't have that much more to add after those two great answers, but I think also we can use our own democratic kind of processes within our own unions to make sure that the voices of disabled people, disabled people's organisations are brought up. So I imagine you've all, at some point around now, got your national conferences. You may also have a disabled workers conference. And so certainly bringing motions to those to really highlight the work that we could be doing with DPOs. I think because often it can be easier for work to get done if there is a motion that's passed, I think. But yeah.
Thank you. Got time to take two more, you said?
Take two now and then before we go.
Okay, two more questions?
Hello, I'm Sofia Elkouris from UCU. There was something that somebody touched on earlier when you said that when something is fixed for disabled people, it benefits the non-disabled people as well. And I'm just thinking about this argument from the other side. So, for example, a lot of things are wrong for everyone in every single workplace. Myself, I'm in university context, so the way everything works there is wrong for everyone. And then the needs of the disabled colleagues become a lot more extreme because the problem is already there, and the local manager is that person that is trying to square the circle of a wrong structure for the entire place, which is worse for the disabled workers. So for me, there is this idea of how can we explain when we demand and we try to change the working conditions, how to show that something is wrong and it is more wrong for the disabled people rather than just saying that something is wrong for the disabled people because it just isn't. So thank you. So, and if you have any thoughts about this, if you think this is a reasonable point. Thanks.
Okay, I'll ask a question, and then my question is this. All the panel have alluded to it. If disability is so much a feature of our lives, all of us, everybody, many people, why is it treated as a minority subject?
Okay. Do we want to handle those questions individually? First question, then the second one?
Yes, so shall we take the first one?
First one. I think it was myself that made the comment about, often an adjustment will make a workplace more accessible to other people. I mean, what you're talking about essentially is poor design. A building may be, or a workplace may be designed quite poorly, and that has a greater impact on a disabled colleague. What you're actually arguing the case for, and what I argue the case for, is universal accessibility, which is basically good design. Just after when I spoke to you earlier about all the adjustments that my colleagues thought of in at a conference, and that were really inexpensive. The one I didn't mention was the disabled worker not doing playground duty. You'd be surprised. In teaching, the sky falls down if somebody can't do playground duty, and I can see colleagues nodding in the audience. That's just a simple attitudinal issue. You can do something else instead, and it doesn't cost any money at all. So, yeah, poor design is a big issue, and universal accessibility, and that's why really that should be more of a function these days of newer buildings. There shouldn't be this heavy need for steps and stairs and, narrow doorways. And, I noticed Amy mentioned surfaces as well. What is so interesting, when we're talking about the social model earlier, you got to see somebody in an environment. In Key Stage 1, I probably fit the furniture better than most of you would. As I go up through school, it becomes more of an issue. You probably could let yourself out of school far easier, some of you, than I could. But as with wheelchair users, I can't easily get myself out of school, which is very important sometimes at the end of a busy day. But, you put me in a supermarket and I struggle. You put me in an inaccessible bathroom that's designed badly, I struggle. And the same within a kitchen that's designed badly. So it's all about good universal accessibility and good design. And I do agree with you, it impacts more on disabled people. And we need to make this argument about poor design. It was a really good question. Thank you.
Yeah, so something that I've been doing in my own workplace, my employer, is that large parts of our estate are really old 1950s buildings. So in the last sort of 10, 15 years, they've been trying to replace some of those. So trying to make sure that the trade unions have a say right from the beginning, right from the point of design. And if you can use that argument that if we get it right for disabled people, you get it better for everybody, it's a really strong argument. And we were really lucky that we had somebody on the design stage that was really willing to listen. I know that's not always the case. But then we've also have trying to get involved with, for the older buildings, obviously it's a lot more challenging, but trying to get involved in facilities management and talking to them about how we can change things. I mean, some people actually prefer the older buildings, particularly if you don't like open plan, which a lot of people don't. So there's pros and cons of both. I've just lost my train of thought. I'll let Svetlana answer.
I'll just add to that. I think there are also. I think this is a very good argument, and of course, yeah, it's universal design. But I think it's also sometimes maybe we need to give examples when things initially were pitched as specific for disabled people, but then they were put in place and everyone benefited. Like that flexible working that we got during pandemic, right? We were asking for kind of possibilities to work from home, for remote access to events and things like that. It was impossible. It was possible in a matter of like days or weeks, and it made everyone's life better. Same, for example, I just think it's so ironic that captions, we put captions on videos. We know why we do this, because we make videos more accessible. How many people just do it generally because they think that if I travel on underground or somewhere on social media, I don't necessarily really listen to video, but I could read. And this happens for everyone. So, and I'm sure there are lots of examples like this where you can kind of show that it has been done and it benefited others. So let's try and do it.
And I'd like to add the workplace that I'm in, our staff side, all as in the NHS, all the policies come through us. Well, in the last couple of months, we worked on when people have to go off for long periods. And it isn't just necessarily sickness, it could be for any reason at all. And the amount of care and thought and one policy for managers, one policy for the person going off. And it's come out as a really powerful document that's going to be presented before the chief execs and the executive team, because it looks at that aftercare before, during, after, before a person comes back onto whatever unit, and to help that person reintroduce them back onto the workplace for whatever reason they've gone off, whether it's maternity or that. So again, it's about exactly what's for us, without us. Nothing for us, without, and nothing without us. So we move on to the next question.
Can you remind me what the next question was, please?
The very powerful point about why we are in a minority.
Right, okay, got you. Sorry about that, Pat. Right, so we're not in a minority, are we? Let's face it. So, we have got, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we talk about people can be disabled from birth. They can be disabled due to older age. They can be disabled due to illness or accident. Lots of people at some point in their life may become disabled. But the interesting thing is we are quite a huge minority. I think I've read something that said we are somewhere between 10 and 20% of the general population, depending on the level of the impairment. So if you're talking quite a sort of deeper level impairment, you're talking about 10% of the population. If you're talking about a bit more, it's not such a strict barrier, then it's perhaps about 20% of the population. So it's quite a lot of us that actually, for whatever reason, either don't disclose or are not aware or, you know, I think it's about politics, you know. A lot of the people in this room are, you know, obviously we're all trade unionists, but you're all quite politicised, I hope, disabled people. There's a lot of people out there that aren't politicised, disabled people. And it's partly an experience within yourself. But yeah, we are a very, very big minority. Thanks, Pat.
And I think that's partly where disability pride comes in, where you can really show just how big a minority we are. I think historically, we've always been considered to be a minority because that's what people wanted us to be. Mm-hmm. They wanted to other us and put us to a side and not really want to think about us. You know, it's our fault, you know, they don't have to deal with it, that's us to deal with. But actually, if we start talking and say, yes, I'm disabled, we've got pride in that, and then we can really show just how many of us there are, and just what we can achieve and how we can make society better for everybody.
I think this question also shows how much work we actually have to do to talk about social model. And this is something all of us could do to help other people who are, say, not so politicized to understand there is nothing wrong with impairment. It's just part of human diversity, part of human life. What is wrong is how society is organized. And if we help people to see that, more people to understand that, then we will be building pride. And I think really more of us need to be in those positions of power, in those positions where we are seen as proud disabled people, so others could also be encouraged to do that and accept us as not a minority, but as a majority, because, at some point everyone will.
I think the other last point I wanted to just add was as well the fact that when a change happens to us, we know the majority of people not necessarily always disclose disabilities, as in unseen disabilities. But I noticed a difference having to walk with that thing down there in the last few weeks. I've only had that few weeks. The first biggest barrier for me was actually accepting it. I didn't want to have that or a stick, and suddenly you become visible. I'll tell you, that's been the biggest shock for me. It's like somebody was saying about having to be in a wheelchair. It's a shock how society sees you. But after barriers are what's in here and with each other, society does that in itself. And that's why we need to open the gates for the social model. And I think this panel hopefully has given you an example of why we should be very proud to be around disability.
I think we've got time for 2 more questions.
Have we got time for 2 more?
2 more questions, we'll start here.
We'll have that person over there. It's different when I haven't got a clock here, so I can't do that.
Keep having a pee.
Yeah, hi, Paul Graney, RMT. Just with regard to the social model, with regards to actually getting disabled candidates through the actual door for apprenticeships or actually trying to get them into work in the first place. 9 times out of 10 people will not put down that they have a disability on their application form, mainly because of fear. Mm-hmm. So you've got that thing to combat against. Then if you are at work and you develop a disability, like I did, your employer will spend forever and a day trying to lever you towards the door. It's one of the only characteristics that's actually used as a means to get you out the door. And that's still probably more prevalent now than ever. I've actually seen firsthand with regards to where reasonable adjustments, and I've actually sat there, I'm the dad of an autistic 19-year-old who's just due to finish college and trying to find out his next steps. And Terence said, residential care is an option. How? He's got a perfectly loving home. You know, we're willing to put in hard yards to actually give him the support he needs. You know, with support, he would need to be supported, but he could actually go into a workplace and actually have a meaning of, like, wellness about himself. I've gone in and I've contributed. Residential care, £18 an hour, 18 times 24 times 7, or 18 times 24 times 7, or 18 times 24 times 365. £142,000 to come back at. So to tell you what, why don't you give me 10% of that? And basically what we'll do is we'll try and get a working apprenticeship where you'll actually get supported living with it. It's bearing in mind, and the people who actually sat around the table, with that individual in particular, there were 6 people who sat around that table, all on a Teams meeting. each and every one of them, bar the parents, are actually getting a form of income out of it. Until we step away of just a name and number, nothing changes. You know, we've got youngsters who are incredibly talented and gifted. And the thing is with it is 9 times out of 10, they're afraid to actually put the disability box. They won't put disabled on there. A lot of people won't when they go through the door. That needs to change. And that's what a social model of things is really, really important. But again, it needs to be changed en masse. And that's where the reps, because 9 times out of 10, the reps don't even get to see anybody until they're being levered towards the door, let alone reasonable adjustments. And the reasonable adjustments that are more often than not, are considered, oh no, they're way too expensive. You've not even investigated them. 9 times out of 10, it's literally just taking part of that job you can't do, going to your colleague next to you, probably doesn't like the other bit of that job that you would want to give to, that you can do. Okay, well, we'll just chop 10% of your job and give it to the person next to you. They don't mind doing it. And that's pretty much where we are. So, yeah, we have got a major fighting around with regards to social models of disability.
Thank you. Do you want to come on that one, Colin?
Yep. It's interesting, isn't it? I always think when it comes to jobs, you know, there's always that debate, you know, whether you disclose as disabled or not. If you've got a visible impairment, you don't really have the option. But, you know, if you've got a less apparent or invisible impairment, you have got that option for a while. I would like to think that, you know, people were in our unions, they were part of our disabled members section, and that together they felt the support of, you know, the colleagues and the policies, and that they felt like, I mean, what happens in education is that they felt like that they could apply for a job and that they could say that they were a disabled candidate and have adjustments at interview. And then, you know, even if they were not struggling with their impairment at the time, you know, they could stress all of those things that I mentioned, you know, that you were good at planning, that you were flexible, that you were adaptable, all those things that you use in your everyday life as a disabled person. And that, you know, you talk about the adjustments you need so that actually when you do need them, you've mentioned them already and it doesn't come as a big shock and a big battle. But it all depends on getting the right employer. You know, all of our members, so we have loads and loads of workplaces, and some managers, some head teachers are wonderful, and some are, let's just say, less wonderful. And we have in our profession the fitness to work criteria, and so that's quite medical model. There's no two ways about it. It's very outdated, which leads you to somehow believe this idea that mentally and physically you've got to be sort of built like a Trojan, really. It's ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, and as for our young people, particularly our neurodivergent young people who, you know, may well be autistic, I think we need to start getting our heads around this. It's not about this sort of necessarily hard and fast model of, you know, full-time work in an office, in a set workplace. It's about doing what is good for people, the amount of work that is good for people, that is adapted to what somebody's interested in, that actually brings value to them and to the rest of society. Because I completely agree with you. We need to be much more creative as to what we're able to, you know, sort of offer our young people, because it's not good enough anymore to just sort of put some of those young people to one side. That's just completely unacceptable. And, you know, I can think of 2 other families already in my head that have a very similar situation to yourself.
And just a few years back, the TUC produced some really good documents about how you make apprenticeships inclusive and accessible. I think that's something we can definitely highlight with our own employers. I forgot what I was going to say.
I think I don't have much to add. I think this is, thank you for sharing this. This is an illustration of how you feel people feel isolated, alone, and that's where power of unions comes, and everyone here in the room could do something to change that a little bit, as Amy says.
Oh, I remember the other thing I was going to say now. Apologies. It's also things like, if we can get to the point that employers understand that it's of their benefit that the employers that people put down that they're disabled on their applications or at the point of interview, because at that point, if they do go to Access to Work, then it's fully funded and it vastly decreases the costs. It's something that my own employer is trying to do. They're trying to get people to disclose earlier, and they're trying to get the processes in place to get things done quicker. But there is a benefit to both sides. And also somebody's much more likely to stay in work. I mean, I know that many of our workplaces, it feels like if we disclose that you're being pushed out. But actually, there's also the other argument that if we do disclose, and we can, with the support of our trade unions, get the reasonable adjustments that we need, and also as a whole as trade unions to campaign for and negotiate the policies and procedures that are inclusive, then we should be able to get more disabled people staying in work. And the more we shout about how many disabled people actually are working for our organisations, the more that employers will realise actually it matters. We're not talking about a minority of staff here, we're talking about big sectors of their staff. And we know that there's an employment problem, certainly in my organisation we have a retention problem, and actually the more they can do to retain and recruit the right people, then that's good for them as well.
And I wanted to just add very quickly, I actually know someone I live in Lincoln, and I know this, I've worked with a lot of people with neurodiverse, and he is the one person that I know that has proved how you can help young people work and get the best out of them. I was also shown a video by someone that has one of the best jobs on the subject of knowledge. She works for Autism East Midlands. She goes to employers and tells them about how they can change the workplace. But she showed us a video in her training package. And this video is a neurodiverse person trying to go to the job centre to ask for a job. And it all comes down to language. It's asking them, so what skills have we got? This is a classic example. So the person's thinking, skills. So is it dressing? Is it putting my shoes on? Too big. And at the end of it, the person sits on the floor saying, I'm not unemployable. It's got to start somewhere, isn't it? There needs to be more people like that, so willing to go that extra mile, forget the money side, because that's what's stopping it, and see what people can do one-to-one with people. And that's what my friend does in Lincoln. He does a very good job, but he's in the minority. So unfortunately, we've run out of time to take any more. Thank you for your contributions, and enjoy the next panel discussion, which will be tomorrow, and enjoy the rest of the conference.